You're watching a growing revolution. For 2 years, we've reported from the front lines of a battle between those who say marijuana saved them,
The children and I have my husband and father with us.
the doctors who want to prove it,
We had to demand that this plant be allowed to go through the drug development process of the FDA.
and federal agencies that have stood in the way.
That was extremely demoralizing to me.
At stake, the ability to use marijuana as a regulated prescription drug. Some say it's the only thing that works. A veteran and a stay-at-home mom suffering from PTSD, a painter with chronic pain, a truck driver with Alzheimer's. We are in the midst of a marijuana revolution. Scientists are poised to prove marijuana can change lives.
This is high times in marijuana research. It really is.
And for our elected leaders as well,
This bill that we are introducing,
the tide may be finally turning.
Our drug laws in this country as a whole need a revolution of common sense and compassion.
I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta. This is Weed 3, the marijuana revolution.
I just went every day and sat by his bedside, and they told me that he'd wake up the next day, and he didn't. Then he didn't wake up the next day, and he didn't. He was 5 days in intensive care while I held vigil over his bedside. It was a very difficult time. I don't like to even really go there.
Chrissy Kernan doesn't want to go back to that day in 2011 when her husband Sean overdosed on prescription drugs.
It was the most terrible and horrifying thing I've ever been through.
Did you want to die?
I just wanted to end it that second. I wanted to end, I wanted to stop.
Sean Kernan wanted it to end because the drugs he hoped would save him were killing him.
I couldn't stick on anyone, and I just wanted to end, so I did something that, thank God, it wasn't permanent.
22 United States veterans kill themselves every day. Sean was almost one of them. Like many vets, he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, also called PTS. For Sean, it was the U.S. Army, the jungles of Panama. He saw too much after the U.S. invasion, when riots, ambushes, and casualties were a regular occurrence.
There's the sad times, losing friends and people who you served with, and you start to question everything.
Questions that lingered when he got home. Despite having a beautiful wife whom he loved very much, 4 kids, a lucrative career in banking, Sean's life was full of darkness. He was prescribed dozens of different medications to help his sleep, to decrease his anxiety, to try and curb his depression. But none made it better. Most made it worse.
You can imagine how awful this situation is for vets, how you've overcome the symptoms and how...
Dr. Sue Sisley, a psychiatrist, has been treating veterans with post-traumatic stress for decades.
There's this huge constellation of symptoms, everything from insomnia to anxiety to flashbacks, and each one of those target symptoms generally would receive another prescription. They end up getting stuck on 8, 10, or 12 different medications, and suddenly they're like zombies. There's just a few meds on the market that work, and even those are really inadequate.
But there is one medication that holds a lot of promise.
Marijuana is excellent for PTSD.
Rick Doblin is a researcher and also has a doctorate from Harvard. He's been trying to study marijuana for decades.
One of the surprising things about marijuana is that it suppresses dream recall. For people that are traumatized and have nightmares, the opportunity to have a good night's sleep without remembering their nightmares can be fundamentally transformative. Also, marijuana tends to focus people's attention on the here and now, and that's also really important for people that are carrying the trauma from the past into the present.
If all of that was true, it sounded like marijuana could be an ideal treatment for PTSD. Yet understandably, there are many skeptics. Dr. Sue Sisley was one of them.
I was really stunned when more and more patients were coming out of the shadows and disclosing to me that they were having some useful experiences with this marijuana plant.
When you use marijuana, what happens to the PTSD?
They relax me and they help with my muscle spasms and my pains, and they make me sleepy, so they help me when I'm getting closer to bedtime.
But Dr. Sue Sisley would need more than just stories. She needed scientific proof that marijuana eases PTSD. She wanted to study this plant like you would any other medication.
We had a duty as medical professionals to demand that this plant be allowed to go through the proper drug development process of the FDA.
So Dr. Sue Sisley, the skeptic, and Rick Doblin, the believer, joined forces and started their crusade in 2009.
That's what we're hearing from most of these vets. They really want two different coins.
Their goal? To investigate this simple but profoundly important question. Could marijuana help save veterans like Sean Kernan?
The veterans are saying they want an activating strain for the morning and then they want a sedating strain at night.
Problem is, they first applied to the federal government for approval in 2010 and were rejected. Then again in 2012, but were delayed for years by government bureaucracy.
That was extremely demoralizing to me. It was just frustrating.
I can understand some concerns about inefficiency and some cumbersomeness.
FDA Deputy Director Douglas Throckmorton.
For marijuana, 3 agencies are involved in making sure that you're available to get the marijuana and then able to conduct a trial.
He's talking about the Food and Drug Administration, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And if you're a privately funded cannabis study, like Sisley and Doblin's, you also have to get the approval of the United States Public Health Service. It's a lot of government red tape. And it's an issue that we reported on in our earlier documentaries. Weed. It was a Schedule I controlled substance. The government was saying it had no medicinal value.
We're being handcuffed by the government, preventing us from doing the right trials.
That's from Weed 2, Cannabis Madness. Rick Doblin believes the right people were watching because just 4 days after that documentary aired,
I got this letter saying that they had approved the study. It was fantastic. I mean, I was elated.
How big a deal was that? Some have called it a watershed moment in marijuana research.
Yeah, I believe that. And not because of some reevaluation of the risks and benefits of marijuana. It was because of changes in public perception.
For years, decades really, there's been hardly any United States research into the benefits of medical marijuana. On the contrary, most of the research focused on the harmful effects of the plant. Now, nearly 5 decades after it was deemed illegal, we are seeing history unfolding. The beginnings of a marijuana revolution.
FDA's official position is we want that drug studied. We want marijuana studied to decide its safety, its efficacy, its reliability, and we want to have that done as quickly as we possibly can.
That's music to the ears of veterans like Sean Kernan, who had to be convinced that marijuana could be the right option for him.
I talked to some people who weren't the stereotypical, persons who smoke marijuana. They were highly successful, highly motivated people.
He was once suicidal, but Sean now has hope. Hope that comes from this plant and from that new study, which might prove its benefit once and for all. When we come back, first step, getting their hands on the precise strains of research-grade marijuana. It would prove harder than Sisley and Doblin could have imagined.